Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Hampton, and I'm the publisher of CityWatch. And joining me is Mihran Kalaydjian, a seasoned public affairs and policy expert. He's got over 20 years' experience, respected in the community as a leader and an education advocate. He's active in civic initiatives, and he contributes regularly to CityWatch LA about education, engagement, and policy issues, and whatever comes to his mind. Hello, Mihran. How are you?
Hello, Jim. Good afternoon. It's very good to be here, and I'm very excited, genuinely excited to be here on this series of the show. And I've been looking to this opportunity not only to share my perspective, but also to engage in a meaningful discussion. It's always pleasure to connect with people who care deeply about these topics and others.
And I think your goal is really to kind of engage all of the movers and shakers in the city, the people who make a difference. And you were able to get an exclusive interview with LA City Attorney Hydee Feldstein Soto, who is the first woman and the first Latina to hold that office. You know, right off the bat, she tackled some complex legal challenges from public safety and homelessness to environmental justice and government accountability. And Mihran, your interview covers a lot of those topics. So, how did you start the interview?
Uh, I started my interview by asking her what motivated her to run for city attorney and how has her experience so far compared to her expectations. And also, as the first woman and Latina in this role, how has she identified, influenced her approach to justice and leadership?
All right, let's go to the interview.
The interesting thing, Mihran, is my identity I try to keep out of leadership. I try to take the values that I learned in my cultures. But this is a job that is technical, independent, and advisory in nature to the city. And where I have discretion, it is critical that I exercise that discretion impartially. So, for example, as the chief prosecutor for the city of Los Angeles, I have guidelines that focus on prosecution of conduct, not content. So if I prosecute protesters, it doesn't matter what they're protesting. If they're shutting down a public freeway, if they are vandalizing our civic buildings, if they are committing battery on somebody else, that's conduct that under my charge, under the city charter, I must prosecute as a misdemeanor. And I try to apply, well, not try, we succeed as an office in applying those principles across the board. What I will tell you is that from my Jewish roots, I bring to the job values of hard work, of compassion, of what we call tikkun olam, which is repair the world, heal the world. When people say to me, are you having fun? My answer is this is not a fun job, but I get up every day, I come to work, and I have an opportunity to do good, to make the world a better place, to be useful. From my Latina role, I come back with the principles of collaboration, of reaching across agencies, across communities, across lines, of not caring who gets the credit, but keeping my head down and getting things done. And so when you take those two identities and you combine them in this office, I think you get the result that you get a pretty clear vision of what is my leadership role and my vision for the office and for the City of Attorney's Office of LA.
Thank you. They always ask me to ask you this question: what motivated you to run for city attorney? And how has your experience so far compared to your expectations?
That's a very long answer, so I will try to keep it short.
Right.
Why run? There was a push and a pull. Okay, the push was I thought our city was broken. Remember that when I took office, this office had been raided by the FBI. We had 3 senior lawyers in this office under criminal investigation. We had, I think, 5 or 6 under investigation by the state bar. We had a scandal that had overtaken the city attorney's office in the Department of Water and Power. We had 3 formerly sitting council members either convicted or on trial for public corruption. And we had at least 2 senior city officials under investigation for the same thing, both of whom have now been convicted of public corruption. So sitting on the outside as someone who had practiced law for over 40 years and practiced at the very highest, most professional levels of the profession, I was appalled. I thought that we needed to bring some integrity and some common sense and some outside of City Hall perspective to the office, and I still think that, and I hopefully fulfill that role. I seem to do it on a regular basis. That was the push. The pull was that my dad passed away the year before I ran, and when I read his obituaries, my father was just a mensch, just a wonderful, wonderful human being. He was a corporate lawyer by day to put food on the table, and he always did pro bono work and public service and community work by night. And he was a professor at a university. He took pro bono cases on some of the most difficult matters in the 70s. And I thought to myself, this is a chance to give back. I'm still young enough. I have a skill set that I can run for this office. And if I get it, I can do the job. You should also note it was an open seat. I don't think that as a relative unknown, I ever would have run against an incumbent. So it was an open seat, and there was a crowded field of 6 or 7. And I sort of thought to myself, and none of whom had ever held elected office before. And I thought to myself, okay, I have as much of a chance as anybody, and I have a message, and I have a mission to rely upon, and I was fortunate enough to win.
Thank you. That's very good. Now moving to one of our main crises on homelessness and enforcement. Homelessness remains a top crisis in Los Angeles. From a legal standpoint, what is your office doing to balance compassion with public safety?
There's a long list of things that my office has been doing on public safety, some of which overlaps with homelessness. Stepping back, I would note that under the leadership of Mayor Karen Bass and in this administration, we have seen the first decrease in homelessness count in each of the last 2 years. It's been a double-digit decrease. I don't take credit for that. Okay, that is entirely our mayor and our city council, and my hat is off to them. They have really embraced these issues and taken it on to try to decrease street homelessness, especially. In terms of what does my office do? Well, we worked very closely with the mayor's office on ED1 in an effort to speed up the permitting. I believe that under ED1, we have cleared close to 20,000 projects to proceed, housing projects. The difficulty is, and we can get into this a little bit later, I believe that only about 2,000 have broken ground. So permit and front end and city regulation is obviously only a small part of the equation in the development of affordable housing. Because we've permitted a lot more units than are currently able to get financing in the market and are currently able to break ground. I focused a lot on prevention of homelessness because that is much more of a legal issue than actually finding the funds in the Section 8 vouchers to connect people to services. So I opened the first outdoor community outreach court on Skid Row, and we go on the 3rd Thursday of every month from 9 to noon. And I want to give a shout out to Cynthia Gonzalez of my office because she's really taken the project and run with it. But the community outreach court is in collaboration with the court system itself, the Superior Court, the then presiding judge, with the Public Defender's Office, and with leadership provided by the Supervisor Solis specifically, and Mayor Karen Bass, to really sit down and provide an environment where homeless folks can come and take care of their legal issues. If you think about it, someone who doesn't have a roof over their head doesn't want to come to court. They have to leave their belongings outside and they could get taken. So by providing a safe space, and it's at the Refresh spot on Skid Row, third Thursday every month, 9 to 12, I'm plugging it, yes. We have individuals who don't have a roof over their head, but who have barriers to their ability to apply for jobs or qualify for Section 8 vouchers, including, old warrants, old jaywalking tickets, for example, that have just piled up. And we not only provide the mechanism, there's a magistrate judge who's there virtually or in person. We not only provide the mechanism to clear your legal issues, we have service providers there every Thursday. So we are able to connect the folks who come with organizations that can provide them with Section 8 vouchers, or a pathway to housing, or a pathway to counseling, or job training. Or programs that can assist them with their children or with food stamps. We literally have a supportive environment on the third Thursday of every month for the benefit of everybody. And that, I think, is a pathway that's a help up to individuals who are homeless. We also I took a very bold move early on in my administration, and I started the largest public health and safety receivership in the history of the state of California. It's a long story, but ultimately, here's what I will tell you. Our actions led to the stabilization and the preservation of more than 2,000 low-income, extremely low-income, single-room occupancy and studio rental units that were on the verge of being lost all throughout downtown LA and specifically on Skid Row. It was easily the largest affordable housing save in the last 3 years. And that was done by my office, in collaboration with the mayor's office. But it was a solution to what otherwise seemed like an intractable problem. We've worked very closely with stakeholders on solutions for troubled buildings in the city's own affordable housing portfolio. We've identified locations for council members to look at. We've acquired at least one property, and we're working on 2 others to convert either warehouses or SROs or residential hotels into more stable, affordable housing. P.S. I defended Measure ULA, and that's not necessarily, it shows you how I take my job seriously. Because whether I personally supported it or opposed it, it was my job to make sure that the will of the people was expressed, and that is what I did. Now, when I talked about the 20,000 units and only 2,000 breaking ground, some of that is the fact that it's very difficult to get financing in the current environment, especially with ULA, for new construction for multi-unit housing. And so I hope we're in a position to fix that soon. I also took an antitrust bill to Sacramento. It was introduced last year, but it did not proceed through the legislative process. And the theory behind that is simple. For a very long time, Sacramento has worked on supply, releasing the zoning, construction. The difficulty with doing too much more with that lever, and it is a valid lever for creating more housing, but the difficulty with doing too much more with that lever is that we sort of hit the wall. And with some of the push that they're trying to do now, it will cost our city billions and billions of dollars unless the state funds us for the infrastructure that is needed to support the density in what are low density zones. So our city doesn't need a lot of infrastructure if you build a building on a commercial street, because the electricity is there, the sewage is there, the water is there. But if you plunk down a 100-unit building in an R2 zone, which is 4 units and under, we can't afford the upgrade. The simple example that I like to give is trash collection. When you are in a residential R1 or R2 zone, we have the little city trucks with 1 employee, and the city depends on the free labor of the homeowners to bring the trash cans in and out. And the city truck has a route through the residential neighborhood and picks it up with 1 arm. When you go to 5 units or more, which almost all affordable housing has to be for it to pencil out, you need the dumpsters. You can't rely on the free labor of the residents. and it's a large truck. We outsource that work, and it takes 3 employees, not 1. For us just to change the trash collection to pick up a single building in an R2 zone is extremely costly if we can do it at all. And it goes throughout our infrastructure. Electricity steps down, as the distribution lines move. Some of the distribution lines are underground, but a lot of the transmission lines are overhead. And if you look at the transmission lines and the electrical boxes, you typically have 40,000 volts available for every commercial block. The step down to residential streets is it's usually around 4,000 volts, is my understanding. So just to upgrade the electricity is a fortune. And you can imagine the sewage and the water pipes, and it's all the same thing. So I've taken a bill to Sacramento that deals with the demand, because you look around and you see half-empty buildings, and the half-empty buildings are often an investment portfolio decision by capital. So if you have investment capital overseas, a lot of the diversification investment strategy focuses on coastal regions in the United States. Antitrust is a form of regulation that has been around since the 1890s. It's the lightest form of business regulation, and you see it at work now. If we had antitrust laws that applied to residential housing, you wouldn't have the market allocation and some of the price fixing issues that are coming up in Altadena and Pasadena. So I've taken an antitrust bill. I can keep going. I've done a lot on housing.
Hydee, I have another question for you. Given court rulings limiting homeless encampment enforcement, what is your rigorous strategy to balance constitutional rights with residents' right to safe, clean public spaces?
Thank you. I wrote a brief and submitted it in the Grants Pass decision, and I defended, as I was required to do. Again, I defend the city's laws. I defended the city's regulation, which is Municipal Code Section 4118. And I enforce 4118 anytime I'm asked to. Anytime I get a referral from law enforcement. Understand, my office doesn't go out into the streets and police. We don't have the power of arrest. We don't have any of the authority that people seem to think we have. We are responsible for the prosecution of misdemeanors committed by adults in the city of LA. So someone has to send us the case, and we will prosecute. But we try to work both sides of that fence. We try to work with the mayor's office, and we have developed a lot of the short-term leases, a lot of the liability and risk management issues for the Inside Safe program. And that has fallen to my real estate branch. And we will defend, if you will, the city's right to keep our streets clean. But ultimately, that doesn't fall to my office. That falls to some combination of the Los Angeles Police Department, the council member in whose district the encampment is located, the mayor's office, and the sanitation department.
Wow. Moving forward to the city lawsuits and settlements, the city of Los Angeles pays out hundreds of millions in legal settlements each year. What is your plan to reduce these cost payouts, and why haven't we seen more success so far?
Litigation blew up exponentially the first year I took office. Some of that was the buildup during COVID, because the courts were not as active. And so once COVID ended, there were 3 years worth of cases in the first 2 years. Some of that is the way prior administrations structured settlements in my office. So, for example, there is a settlement called Willits, which requires us to bring all of our intersections and sidewalks into compliance with federal ADA standards every time we fill a pothole. I'm kidding. But when we do repairs, and we must spend at least $20 million a year on that settlement. We have another settlement called Independent Living Centers. That, and by the way, Willits was entered into in 2015. It goes till, 2030, till after my second term. Okay, it's a long time. We have another settlement called Independent Living Centers, where we have already paid out an awful lot of money, and yet there's a voluntary compliance agreement that requires us to retrofit thousands of units. requires a minimum expenditure. Again, I think it's $20 million a year. Plus, we have a court monitor in that case who was originally paid $650,000 a year and is now up to $1.4 million, okay, for a two-person law firm in Denver, Colorado. So from my vantage point, I have inherited an awful lot of consent decrees and structured settlements that chew into my budget. Going forward, I will settle any case with anybody who's reasonable in amount. When I get a settlement offer, I don't care who it is. If what you're talking about is a single human being who's been injured, okay, or who has emotional distress against the city or something, if I will not settle for 8 figures. To me, that is insane. That's jury money. And I typically will not settle for 7 figures if there aren't serious medical costs. So when I get an employment claim from somebody who's worked under a supervisor they don't like for 18 months and got promoted and has maybe 10,000 of visits to a psychologist or stress or distress, and a jury awards $14 million for that claim, our juries need to be educated. Our public needs to be educated. This is taxpayer dollars. When I'm responsible and liable, and I have the city has no defense, I will stipulate to liability. And I will make an offer that I think fairly values the case. My rule of thumb is I'll pay you for every dime of harm that arose out of my liability, and I will pay you for lost earnings. I will pay every cent of economic harm. I will do everything that we can do to make someone we have hurt whole. But what I will not do is either give a lottery ticket, okay, to turn somebody into a multimillionaire, or give a lottery ticket for an inheritance to someone who's unlikely to ever recover. And so when I get settlement offers of 200 million, 60 million, 40 million, 10 million, I just don't, I can't see my way clear to spending your taxpayer dollars in that way. I have thousands of lawsuits. If I start settling at those numbers, we will not have enough funds to go along, and it will become like a game of musical chairs. Who can get me to court first? And so 2 weeks ago, when I didn't settle, I just got hit with a $48 million verdict. Juries are giving, sums of money that candidly your city government can't afford to pay. And they're doing it in a situation where however hurt someone is, please understand that we will pay to make someone whole. We will pay their medical expenses as long as they live, that for any injury we have caused. But we can't just write a blank check for soft cost, whether they're called pain and suffering or anxiety or depression or loss of companionship.
So very interesting.
It's a tough job. It really is, Mihran.
This is very detailed, what you just mentioned. I'm glad that you mentioned. Under the corruption and misconduct, cases has shake public trust. What is your approach to handling such cases, especially when they involve city officials?
Okay, number one, I do not investigate my own client.
Oh, wow.
That's not my job as the city attorney. Public corruption in the city of Los Angeles does not fall under my jurisdiction if it is a city employee. Okay, if it's a vendor to the city, that's a different issue. But if it's a city employee, that is my client, and it's inconsistent, I think, with my duty of loyalty to the city as a whole for me to do that. Those kinds of investigations fall to the district attorney, the attorney general of the state of California, or the U.S. attorney. So that's the first thing to understand. However, that doesn't mean I haven't worked on corruption, because I have. So taking it from the top, I've enforced the competitive bidding procedures of the city's charter. Sometimes it great political cost to self, okay? Because there's this concept of the city family and relationships that go back many years or many decades. And from my vantage point, you can't just keep renewing the same agreements and amending them and extending them without putting them out for competitive bidding. Not under our charter. Our charter has a requirement for competitive bidding procedures. So I'm enforcing that. At the same time, I've taken the process for competitive bidding away from a long 28-page formal request for proposal and a 9-month process and streamlined it so that it's about a 5-page form for those who want to use a request for proposal. And I've shortened the period to as little as 2 weeks for people who have a need, who need to get it done. I've also put on my webpage all of the settlement agreements that bind the city of LA. And working with the planning department, they've put up all of the queue conditions and all of the unpublished ordinances that affect parcels. So now it's on planning's webpage, it's on my webpage, and ZMAS has been completely updated so that anyone who wishes to can really find all the conditions in terms of a project, and there's no longer an unfair advantage or the possibility for favoritism. My office is also not accepting industry drafted ordinances without putting our own stamp on it. I have made it abundantly clear that my lawyers are not allowed, not just my lawyers, no city employee is allowed to accept referral fees. And every contract that I enter into with an outside counsel has a new paragraph that basically says counsel acknowledges and agrees that they can't pay fees, remuneration, anything of value to anyone in the city for city business. I've put a stamp on every city contract over $25,000 that requires the signatory to certify that they have no personal pecuniary or familial interest in the other contracting party or in the subject matter of the contract. I've implemented best practices in my own office in terms of cash management. So when I got here, any city employee could send out an invoice on behalf of the city for fees, penalties, fines, collections, whatever. And the check would come to the individual employee. That's been true all over the city. To have a legal clerk in my office who earns maybe $60,000 a year sending out a $500,000 invoice and having the check come to that person is a problem. Now, I want to be abundantly clear. I had no one in my office, as far as I know, did anything wrong in that regard. There is zero evidence of any corruption, any handling of funds. But as a former finance lawyer, okay, that is not best practices. Checks are the least secure form of payment. So my office now uses a lockbox for payments to us that goes directly to the Office of Finance with a remittance advice to us. And we use ACH payments from the controller's office for payment liability payments out. And both of those modernizations really shut down avenues to corruption. I got a lot more. Oh, one that I think is really important. When my office made recommendations for settlement agreements when I took office, we tried to persuade council to accept our recommendation. So all of the reports were very leaning this, well, we recommend settlement because, and if you don't, we use the reports, I would read them as a lawyer and I would say, wait. It's like we're trying to scare council into accepting our recommendation. I don't do that anymore. We try to write fair and balanced reports. We try to give council the pros and the cons. When we make a recommendation, we make it and we say, this is why we recommend it. But if you don't want to accept the settlement, here's the 3 options. We can go back with a counter, we can do. And so we give them possibility and really leave the purse decision to them. That's a big change. Sometimes I get criticized and I get asked, well, what do you think? And I've told you what I think, but I'm also telling you I'm not the decision maker over the city's money.
Wow. Hydee, regarding the city charter reform, there is growing momentum for city charter reform. What legal challenges or opportunities do you see in revising the city's governance structure?
I think we have lived under the existing charter for a quarter of a century. I think it is very healthy, particularly given the innovations in technology, in communications, the changes in the laws regarding accountability, transparency, and audit controls. I think it is healthy for us to re examine our charter and make the changes that are necessary. I have kind of my own perspective on policy. That is not my job as city attorney. Putting on my policy hat for a moment, I think that our ballot initiative process has been misused on many occasions. Right now, we have a war between business and labor that is not healthy for anyone that's going to be coming up on the ballot next year. I would like to see us, and unfortunately, I think the ballot initiative is a question of the California Constitution, not our charter. But I would like to see our charter modified to deal with some ability for council to vet and some ability for the city attorney without violating any rules to weigh in on the constitutionality, the defendability, the policy, unintended consequences of the manner in which something is drafted. Perhaps a way to do it is to require the city attorney to draft the ballot initiative, assuming people tell us what they want, and then make sure that it is, in fact, an implementing ordinance and not a fundamental shift that raises constitutional and risk management issues. I think we can improve local elections and make them more transparent, and we can engage more people in the process. Down ballot races like mine don't always get the attention that they deserve.
Yes.
It certainly suffers when we're in a fiscal emergency and we may not necessarily have the public finance option available. I'd like to see more open data to cut down on the number of CPRA requests. So just hypothetically speaking, the number of city employees who have to file what's called a Form 700 is in the thousands or tens of thousands. I'd like to see the Ethics Commission put all that on a database. They're supposed to be public documents. They're supposed to be publicly available, and they're not. And so we have the technology to do it. That's really something that ought to be public. The appointment process takes far too long.
Right.
I'd like to see an appointment process that, collapses the vetting and making somebody useful right away so that we're not dealing with a whole number of leftover processes that seem to take a very long time. I personally am in favor of a 2 to 3 year budget cycle, because otherwise sweeping the excess every year is not conducive to the best management or fiscal responsibility, especially since we're not on a calendar year basis. And so I hate the incentive, and I try not to do this. I try to return money when I can, but I hate the incentive to spend down at the end of the year, this use it or lose it. If we had the ability to simply fund projects, then we could take our time in really developing the best approach to how we get it done. I can keep going. Charter reform is good. What do I not want? I don't want my office to become appointed. And I think that if they do that, it will be a poison pill in the entire charter reform process. I am agnostic about the number of city council districts. That is none of my business. That is their chamber, not mine. Okay. And so people will have to decide for themselves. And I don't think there is a magic number that's going to deal with it. Any responsiveness or cost savings could well be offset by the increased discretionary funds, need for offices, district offices, and budgetary needs. those are tricky issues, and those are huge policy issues that are not mine. I would like to take another look at some of the civil service provisions and the pension provisions to make sure that they are fair and operate in the same fashion across the entire city, because I'm not sure that they do.
Wow. And finally, what legacy do you hope to leave for the city and future city attorneys?
Thank you for that, because I've thought a lot about that. I would like an institution that is logical, responsive, is designed to survive the times. So, simply speaking, my office right now, if you promote someone to a given position, even if they're not the right person, and even if you replace them, they keep their title and they keep their positional authority. And so I don't want the administration that succeeds me to have the same issues that I did in terms of inheriting a management structure and something that cannot be changed without an awful lot of pain and without a lot bigger budget and going back to council. I had to initially ask for a larger budget when I first assumed office just to be able to create a real estate branch. So if you're talking about transparency, most of the corruption was in real estate, so I formed a new real estate branch. And I brought in someone from the outside who I trust. I've known a long time. I trust John with handling the branch.
Yes.
I didn't have a chief position. And so I had to go back to council to get that appointment. I would like to leave an institution that has a corporate organizational chart that has been flattened. When I first took office, I had to go through 6 layers of supervisors to speak to a working lawyer. Whose job was something like practicing law rather than telling other lawyers what to do. And so I really would like to leave an organizational structure that makes sense, a business office that conforms to best practices, an organizational structure that has a division. I'm the first city attorney to hire somebody specifically for tenants' rights. I'm the first city attorney to open a procurement and contracting division so that we have consistency across our contracts. I'm the first city attorney to start a workers' rights division to basically work with our Office of Labor Compliance and Compliance Bureau to ensure that all the policies that council passes are respected and enforced and obeyed across the city. And so I'd like to leave an office where each branch understands their role in the system and where nothing slips through the cracks. Every need that the city has can be covered internally, and outside counsel is reserved. I'm always going to need outside counsel because you can't staff up for the 1 in 100-year flood. Okay, you can't staff up for the kinds of cases that the city doesn't regularly deal with. I'm always going to need FAA lawyers. I'm always going to need lawyers for large, complicated, specialized transactions. But this office can and has been the heartbeat of the city. And if I can get it back to what it was during the days of Burt Pines, I will be very proud of the job.
Thank you, City Attorney Hydee, for sharing your vision and experiences. It's clear that your leadership will continue to shape Los Angeles in meaningful ways. We look forward to seeing how your initiatives develop in the months and years ahead, and thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Have a great day.